It's not realistic work by any means. A lot of the work is non-figurative and a lot of it's entirely non-representational. I don't say abstract because I think a lot of people misuse the term. My figurative work is abstract. It's abstracted from reality, and often it's quite different from anything that you would see realistically in reality. But what a lot of people call abstract work is actually non-representational work. It's not seeking to represent anything at all other than itself. It's not an abstraction of anything other than maybe a thought or a feeling. And I'll do some of that. So. Almost always working from a reference, and usually it's a photo. Sometimes it's a photo of a statue. Some of them are my photos, but most of them are not. I have a bad habit of sort of a voyeuristic habit with the internet, which I think a lot of people do, and I take a lot of screenshots and I keep things that I like, and sometimes I want to paint them immediately, and sometimes they sit around in my phone or the iPad for a long time, and then they gather the further magnetism that brings me to them, and then there's a right day to paint them.
So,
But I gravitate towards certain photos of people on the internet, I think, based on the way people present themselves. I like to see the variety of ways people present themselves. And so for that reason, you know that I did this show, the Tinder portraits. I like people's profile pictures on Facebook or anywhere else, but dating apps in particular they're real eye candy for me. Not for dating reasons particularly, but for artistic reasons. People, I think, tend to want to portray themselves in the most unique and confident manner that they possibly can when they're choosing a picture for a dating app. So those pictures often are really they convey a lot. I get a lot out of them. Non-representational work, there's nothing to choose. It's just a matter of what feelings I bring into it and what method I follow when I'm working. That determines the outcome more than anything else, because there's no reference to input. Well, my methods of working are very lackadaisical. I'm lazy, so I spend more time here on this sofa than I do at my work table. But I think the sofa time is important also. It gives me a break, and then I come back and it's fresh again. And a lot of the work that I do, particularly what comes out more successfully, I do very quickly. And when I'm working...
What is very quickly?
I'll work for 10 minutes or 15 minutes at a time. And then I'll need to take a break because I need to wait for paint to dry, typically. If I'm working on paper, I work with acrylic or watercolor or gouache on the table, on a flat surface, and I work with typically quite watery paint, and so it takes time to dry. But it goes down quickly. A lot of the figurative work, which begins with the oil pastel, typically, a lot of the work I've done has been oil pastel and acrylic on paper, and there are basically for me 3 stages to that work. I'll do the sketch in the oil pastel, and then I'll rub the pastel into the paper, and then paint the figure, and then paint the background, and that's it. It's all done, and it's not that much time to work, but it's a lot of time waiting for paint to dry. Artists who have things to say that are interesting about their working process, and I think it's Robert Motherwell, but I'm not sure. But I remember a video that I had watched on YouTube, which also has been how I've educated myself in arts, is watching videos on YouTube. And he talks about the concept of psychic automatism, which is related to, for example, if you're a writer, what is this called? When you sit down and you just write a stream of consciousness kind of writing. You have no objective in mind. Something comes out.
Automatic writing.
Automatic writing. Or Rorschach. What is it? Rorschach or Rorschach test? You know, this ink blotter test when you put the paper together and you get a symmetrical image, and they do a psychological test, and then they ask you, what do you see in this ink blot? And this is supposed to tell you something about your psychic makeup, depending on how you interpret the ink blot. But this relates to psychic automatism, the idea that if you were to go to your work table and work quickly and just start painting abstract shapes, that something comes out of it. And that something is somehow indicative of your specific psychological makeup. And I think this is really quite true. And so that's what leads into this title, this Self-Portraits of Others, because although almost all the work in that show that was presented had some sort of a reference, I think in the end, the piece that I produce is much more indicative of my psychological makeup than it is of the person whose photo I've taken from, or who sat for my portrait, if there had been a case where someone sat for my portrait. So that's how it comes to be self-portraits of others. That although all of the images are other people, they're not me. They're cumulatively creating a self-portrait of me. But the abstract or the non-representational work is what I ultimately would like to do, but I've had less success with it. It's more difficult to ask your mind to get out of the way when you don't know what your objective is. When you have a reference and you're doing figurative work, the reference is your objective, or at least it's the first half of your objective. Of course, the work might end up looking nothing like the reference, and often it does, but it's a starting point. And it's enough of a starting point, and it's enough of something for my mind to latch onto that I can let go of thinking about day-to-day stuff that clogs my brain, and just do the work. But doing something without any reference at all, something non-representational, I'm finding that it's effective to engage some kind of a specific methodology or a ritual in order to do it more effectively. I've been given every reason to believe that I've been welcomed into a family of painters. The painters that I know here and the painters that I know in Bali seem to like what I'm doing. And most of the paintings that I sell actually are sold to other painters more than to non-artists. So I feel happy that I've been welcomed. I'll be even happier when people who aren't making art also are equally recognize what I'm doing. So far it's been people who do make art who recognize it more than those who don't. But I'm happy about that. It's okay.